Howdy, howdy, howdy. Well, let me turn my camera on. Well, now there's a stranger. How you doing, Bill?
Good.
Been a while.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of hair and all
Yeah,
sorts of stuff since the last time you seen me.
that's
Smell
what you
better.
get for having a Corvette.
What's that?
So that's what you get for having a Corvette.
What? What's that?
Hard to keep the hair on as fast as they are.
Just like that guy?
I thought you had a real
That's
one.
yeah. Well, I have the big one of this up in the garage.
Yeah.
So that's my other money pit.
Oh yeah. Hey, Crazy Joe just popped in. Let's see. So what you been up to lately, Bill?
Um, just tearing apart my old layout and gonna reconfigure it into a new one. So
Oh, okay.
Changing scales, John.
yeah, going from little scale up to a bigger scale.
Oh, what
Because
size?
these damn things.
HO.
Yeah, going from N to HO.
Uh, been watching that series. We've had on small layouts, big opportunities.
Not yet.
Passing by you, in. Michael's here. He said Cross Anchors just finished their show, so. Mr. Brad, how you from down under?
Hmm.
Dan's popped in. Hey, Curtis. Well, we got Jason and Ralph and Andy on here too, and Bill.
Yep.
Anybody else want to jump in on panel, you can come on in. Jason, I tell you, it doesn't hurt.
Nope. Not at all.
All right, Dan. I mean, Bill. Dan wants to know about all your Star Wars stuff behind you.
Oh, just collecting over the years. I have a young son that was doing lots of Lego, and his Lego interests were in other um, groups of Lego. So I ended up picking up all the Star Wars stuff from him, and then my wife had bought me some, so I have like Millennium Falcon and such.
Uh,
Just a big collection. They're good to do with the kids together, right? So
oh yeah.
Yeah. Possum Bayou says, if I didn't have so much N-scale stuff, I might switch to HO.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needs a good uncle like mine that just gave me all of his. He had a big 18 by 8 setup that he stripped down and just basically gave me all the components. So it helps.
That's a no-brainer then, right?
Yeah.
As they say.
Well, the thing about it is you can use the N scale over in the background for perspective.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. Be neat.
Yeah, we've had a couple of them in here that have actually combined two scales. One fellow up there near Miles, Miles interviewed him. He was running what was that, HON30 and then HO2. But his was really neat the way he did it. You have one scene where you got the HON30, and then when it's kind of leaving that scene, you're into the HO scene.
Hmm.
They run background to each other.
I always had the idea to do a little amusement park or a little train ride and actually use like Z scale.
Yep.
As for that.
Yeah.
On an HO layout. I think that'd be neat.
Yeah.
Marty done that. Marty, one of our Australian fellows, has a little Z-scale circle of on a module he's built. But I think he largely got started kind of in the circus modeling first with all the animated equipment and such.
The Youngstown Mall Railroad Club has an N scale.
Who left the door open?
On their HO layout, they got an N scale little train that goes around. With they sometimes put dinosaurs next to it and stuff for the open houses.
Thought you locked the door, John.
Yeah.
Josh, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just
your voice still hasn't dropped. What's going on?
Just working a lot. I'm just working a lot. Maintenance and a cart pusher. So I'm 2 different positions at Walmart, and I upgraded my camera equipment recently. $8,000. This is the Canon R6 with a 7200 2.8.
$8,000. I need a job at Walmart. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
I took some. It's a little bit more college savings too, but that's another story for another day. But yeah, I've been saving up for it. I got 2 lenses and a couple other stuff, but yeah, that's all I've been doing. I haven't really touched the layout forever. 2 years.
We've heard.
That's a shame.
One of the reasons I wanted to save up money for this, and also I'd rather play with the big trains.
Rather play with big trains. Okay.
How you been, Andy?
No complaints.
Here.
Nobody to listen. Nobody to listen,
Okay.
even if you did complain.
No. Today I got some cool. I got a scale trades. My scale trades order came in today. I got a couple of SD40s. I got a Norfolk and Western as well, but Southern High Hood from Scale Trades. Those they just come in the mail like a few hours ago.
Is that rivet counter one or?
Yeah.
Would you expect anything different from Andy?
No, I wouldn't.
No.
What say, Robert?
No, I mean I have all the respect in the world for the operators. Liam.
He was being rambunctious because we were watching this on the TV. And he was getting crazy, so I figured I'll just put him on here and he can say hi to everybody, and it'll keep him entertained for 20 minutes or so.
And he calms right down. Yeah.
Say hi, buddy. Read this.
Yes, that's Andy.
It is.
That's Johnny. That's Daddy. That's Johnny. Jesus. Would you just pick one and stick with it? That's Ralph.
I appreciate that they're good sports about this.
That's Josh. Josh hasn't been around in a long time. That's Andy. Well, that was Andy. He's since disappeared.
Yeah,
There he is. He's back.
typical Andy, right?
I know. When you want to talk to him, he just doesn't show up.
Yeah, he
Everything in its seat.
He just popped in, and while you run naked's in now.
I'm pretty sure that's Why Are You Naked for?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
How? I like that he's actually trying to talk to them now.
Yeah, he's talking to pretty much the whole YouTube sphere at the moment. Because I'm not
Okay,
muted.
we got the hand now. He's found the emoticons.
Oh. Hey.
Hey.
So all you got was that one engine?
No, I got the Southern Tuxedo high hood. I got the Norfolk and Western high hood SD40-2s. Both of those come in. And I got a Southern Clader series. These have been pre-ordered for a long time, but that come in today too. But that had been pre-ordered, which the SD40-2s pre-orders, I mean, I guess it was something to do with the COVID or something that delayed everything. Those pre-orders should have came out probably, I don't know, several months ago. I put that in way back at the first of the year or something, and it just came out. But then the container set, the maxi whatever container set, 5-car set of those comes out, and they come in. I'll get mine. That pre-order I just put in like 2 weeks ago or something, and it'll be here next week. So now things are starting to happen pretty quick. So they have the SD45 high hoods, which they come out the first of the year, but they've been delayed some too. The SD45s, man, they really did a good job on those. But I had to get a couple of those. I had to get them in Undex to get them painted correctly, and because I don't have them in Norfolk and Western modern scheme. But I ordered both of them Undeck, and then going to try to talk Ralph into painting them up for me, which honestly, black with NW lettering, I could do that too. But we found a picture of one in the dark blue scheme where it looked like the paint had basically just peeled off entirely. They'd painted it in black over top of the blue. So there was so little of the black left, the blue had basically peeled all the way through it because it hadn't been painted that long. Ralph said it'd be better to start with the blue one. So I went ahead and pre-ordered a third one of those to get one that was already in the blue scheme so we could so Ralph could do that,
Cool.
make it look like all the black had peeled off basically.
Yeah, Michael Libertino. He was asking if he was going to have Ralph weather them.
Yeah, it depends on what they are. So, I mean, Ralph can't weather everything for me. I've got to weather some of it myself. I've been weathering stuff here recently, fading stuff, working on weathering. I've, done the trucks and the fuel tanks on the C30 that I'm rebuilding, C30-7 that I'm rebuilding. I've got the fade on it. I'll probably weather these. I've got a couple that I'm definitely gonna have Ralph do for me if it, as many as he'll do for me, of course. When it comes to locomotives, I'm never going to be as good at it as Ralph is going to be. So when it comes to front end power on a locomotive, I would rather just ante up, pay, and have them done perfectly right for the front end. Now for freight cars and such, I'll do all that weathering.
Well, Ralph said once you go to work for Walmart, then he'll be glad to do everything you want.
Absolutely, that's right. I start making that big money.
Just $12 an hour.
Yeah, why are you naked? That's a hard. Southern radio cars. I have to. I want one or two of those at least. They were using after the Norfolk Southern merger, which is what I'm modeling right past the merger. They were running those a lot more experimentative. Since the Norfolk and Western had not ran them before, so I'm modeling a Norfolk and Western stretch of territory. But after the merger, I do want some of those, but those are hard to come by. So Right Track had a resin kit of the radio car, and I'm shopping for a few. Have eBay and other watch lists set to notify me if I see a Right Track Southern radio car. I'm all over it. I just don't know that I'm willing to drop the $250 or $300 for an Overland brass model for that. I don't think so. I think I'll try to find the Right Track resin kit, but I definitely want one or two of the radio cars for sure. And I want to pack them with batteries, for part of the dead rail stuff.
Yeah, Dwight just popped in a few minutes ago. How you doing, Dwight?
Hey, Dwight, long time.
Not since the last show, anyway.
Yeah, that was last night. I got a busy week this week.
You, Andy, are you modeling before the Steam? How long did the Steam program lasted after the merger? I thought it was only like 1 or 2 years.
93 or 94. I think the end of summer 93, they pulled the 21st Century State or the Steam program as it was at the time. So 1993. So I'm modeling like, I'll pick an exact year, but something around 88, 87, 88, or 89. It will be the year I'll pick. I've been thinking, I've not been buying anything that wouldn't be appropriate for 1987. So I'm appropriate for 1987. I may model 88. I'm still figuring that out. Something right around that period. But they were running the 1218, the Class A at the time, the J, the Southern Makata, the 4501, and they were running those sometimes triple-headed. So it wouldn't be inappropriate to see 4501, the 611, and the 1218 all run together. So, and I have a Class A that, I don't have the 1218, but I'm going to renumber it and set it up as if it were the excursion component, and I'll have a J. So I will run excursion service. That'd be a rare occurrence. If I operated, 5 or 6 times in a year, maybe once a year, you might have, an excursion service. That's part of the operating scheme.
Yeah. I'll be down in West Virginia next month. So for no NW territories.
Oh, real fan.
Yeah, I'm going to be at the Cass Scenic Railroad for their photography weekend. There's actually, if anybody's interested, Cass Scenic Railroad on their Facebook page, there's a post. They're looking for somebody to build a layout. I think it's G Gauge. They want somebody to build a layout of the company of Cass to put in the store, like the gift shop kind of place at Cass.
That's going to be awfully big for a gift shop.
Or something.
They've got a pretty good sized gift shop. They've got a pretty good sized train O-gauge set up in there right now. It's just big oval track, but they've got something set up in their gift shop.
It might be O-gauge. I didn't really pay attention but they did post. It's oval. I know that.
Yeah, they got a. I almost want to say it's a 20-foot by 4-foot set up in there right now. It's just like I said, it's just an oval of track, or at least they did this summer.
It might be O gauge. I didn't really pay attention. I thought it looked G gauge, but it could be O gauge.
Probably O gauge. Anyway, Michael Patino wanted to know, Ralph or anybody, was it good to use the strip numbers off a locomotive?
Ooh. Who's the manufacturer of the locomotive?
We'll
You
have to
can
wait and
pretty much do it on Athearn units with a piece of paper towel cut just slightly larger than the numbers, and Solvaset. Solvaset.
And that's taking away the pad print, or is that a decal that's in place?
They don't use decals anymore.
That's what I
Decals.
thought. They're all
Decals.
pad printed.
They're all pad printed. So that removes the pad print, pretty much. You let it. You keep the paper towel moist for about 5 minutes, maybe 10, and at the end of it, you can basically wipe it off, or use a piece of tape and lift it off.
I thought
The
that
numbers,
was
that is.
decals or decals.
No, it's for pad print.
About everything's pad printed anymore. That's why it's really tough to do anything
No,
other than just paint over.
If it's Cato, you may have issues getting it off.
Okay, maybe that is. Maybe that is GH.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the lever.
I was thinking it's three rail, O scale. $25 by 8. I think it was that big.
Josh, you're muted.
If anybody's interested in Billing Company Town, I just thought it would mention it. That was on there. But yeah.
They've also got a nice model of a switchback.
Is it automated? I've seen that before.
No, I think it looked like it was just a diorama.
Just there. There's a N-scale layout that's a club built. It's a Fremo, but they had a switchback, and they had it automated. It was pretty cool. I've seen one time.
Oh, see, Samurai jumped in the chat over here.
I've seen one time.
I've got photos of it or not.
So how long you think it'll be before you get trains running again there, Andy?
I think if I do it right, summer, I could have it shortcutted together to actually be running, and probably by the end of the year, be prepared enough that meaningful operations. So I'm trying to align like several goals together. So I'm trying to align getting enough track work up and running and getting the connection between the two levels running. I've got staging done on the bottom level. I need to, tip. I don't have to tip it in. I need to get the, 3 or 4 tracks on the top, enough to do staging on top, and get enough equipment. That's actually a surprisingly difficult thing, is trying to get enough equipment to actually operate. To have a meaningful operating session just with, say, 2 other operators, 3 of us, as I figured, I need in the neighborhood of 20 locomotives, in the neighborhood of 150 cars or so. I mean, so far I've picked up about 8 locomotives and 75 cars or so since I moved eras. So all this new stuff, but at $250 or $300 a locomotive and $55, $60 a freight car, that's a budgetary constraint just to be able to get to an operating consideration, So if I want to operate by the end of next year, you can talk about all the time in the world about laying track, etc. There's still $6,000, $7,000 to get the equipment in order to have an operating session. So, time aside, labor aside, just the raw money to get to that point. I mean, I'm trying to, I'm rebuilding some Atlas C30-7s. I got one of those recently. Ralph's been kind of talking me through some of the weathering and stuff on it, and I'm rebuilding it. That might get me some more motive power that meets my standards, with some etched metal parts, separate grabs, properly weathered, ESU decoder, etc., to where I can possibly get a little bit more and some unique motive power. You're still talking about $200 a locomotive. That's the best that I can possibly get by. It's about $200 a locomotive. So,
Yeah, Adrian Glaston agrees.
I mean, when you got when you're running a mountain railroad, you got 3 locomotives a train. So even if you're reusing some of those, and you've got 2 railroads to contend with, so let's say you put 5 locomotives on the CSX, you've got something like 13 to 15 locomotives for the Norfolk Southern. A couple of those are your pushers, so you're 12 locomotives. That's 4 trains. Period. Again, you could reuse a couple of those, consists, but if you're going to have a meaningful operating session with 3 folks, internet or otherwise, ideally you're going to run a dozen trains in an operating session. Each person's going to want to run a train, at least twice, possibly 3 trains.
This might sound like a crazy idea, though. But why don't you just get a bunch of old Tyco stuff and slap different wheels and couplers on it and run it for now until you can give you a little more time to put the rolling stock together the way you want it.
Well, I mean, I could get partway there.
Robert, did you say Tyco?
Yeah, hold on.
You realize you're talking to Andy, right?
No, I know. I understand that. That's why I said it's probably a crazy idea, but.
Well, but you could but you don't have to go that far. I could get the Atlas C30-7 for example, like the one I'm working on now, and just get decoders in them. Not worry about detail parts and that kind of stuff. But the detail parts and stuff are the inexpensive part. If you're paying $75-ish for a locomotive, an Atlas unit with Kato drivetrain, $75, just putting a decoder in it, you're talking $100, $105 for a decoder. So just buy the locomotive, $75.
I understand that the economics of the whole thing and doing things economically doesn't make a lot of sense for you, but
I'd love to do it economically.
You don't need to jump straight into the golden pig route.
But if I go buy, say I go buy a bunch of $15 a piece pieces of rolling stock, maybe I can sell those on eBay later or something. But I sure don't want to use them as part of my long-term fleet. And by the time I go,
a bunch of $15 pieces to get you up and running now, and then you slowly transition those out to the $60 pieces that you want over time.
right? But the long-term cost of that costs more money. Now, but it does have an expedience factor. Time does matter. And especially when it comes to rolling stock. The locomotives, that doesn't necessarily make as much sense. Let's say I bought a $100 operator series scale trades locomotive for $100, or I bought an Ather RTR for $100, and it stuck a $100 decoder in it. That's $200. That's sensible enough, and I can do the detailing later, and that's as cheap as I'm going to get by with trades that will operate well enough to be able to consist into locomotives. I could chitch on some of the rolling stock. That's possible. Yeah. But I could chitch on
That's what I would do. I'm more worried right now about building up my locomotive fleet, but I'm also not going to go for, every piece has to be brass and have, etched metal parts all over the place. And there's no point in doing that.
No, but if you weigh out the cost difference, if you take an Atlas locomotive or an Ather RTR locomotive at $100 on eBay, used on eBay, $100, or a Scale Trades ready to run operator series without the detail parts, you're $100 plus a decoder. So you're $205 to $210 for a locomotive any way you go. And these rivet counters with decoders and all the details are only $250. So the cost difference in cheapskating locomotives versus the top end of a locomotive, that cost difference is pretty negligible.
But that's also, you're also considering $125 sound decoder, right? You don't need a 3 consist sound decoders. You don't need that much. You do one. Do the other 3 soundless. It covers you.
Maybe, but you've got to consist these things together, and they have to have decoders. Remember, I'm using proto throttles, so they have to have decoders that program that
way.
way.
Get away with the $25 Digitrax decoder for that.
Andy, you're talking about temporarily until you get the other equipment. There's no reason to go full blown on your temporary stuff.
Well, but you have to weigh out the temporary cost versus long term. Now, decoders. You could buy Loc Pilot decoders. They have to be ESU decoders. I can't run Digitrax decoders because they don't have the full throttle feature set. So you can't consist them and lock them out. So I could put Loc Pilot decoders. I could save some money there. I don't fear hitting my target with locomotives. I think I'll hit my target with locomotives. It's getting the rolling stock fleet to a meaningful place because I'm prioritizing locomotives, and that cost difference is not as much as you think it is when you lay out both number sets in a spreadsheet. The cost difference between cheapskating as much as possible, even wasting to the point of wasting money, and buying the good stuff, because Scale Trades locomotives $250 with a decoder and everything. They're not that expensive. That cost difference is negligible, and I can prioritize that. Rolling stock is a challenge. Getting enough freight car fleet to operate meeting fleet, that is probably where your ideas of placeholder rolling stock probably makes a lot of sense. Buying a bunch of AccuRail equipment or regular Walthers equipment or something, and placeholder it until I can get
just buy you a bunch of the $5 or $10 Mantua rolling stock, man. You're killing me here. It comes with metal wheel sets and cable couplers.
Yeah, but by the time you got to weigh it all out. By the time you buy a $5 piece of freight car, $5 or $6 freight car kit, and then go buy couplers and wheel sets, you're already back at $8 or $9, $10. True. You can buy an AccuRail new in the box for $10 with the metal wheel sets and the couplers ready to go. You don't have to you don't always come out going the cheapest, but you can make a middle of the road compromise. But you've got to weigh it all out, and it's not an easy decision when you're talking about 20 to 30 locomotives on a layout plus and several hundred freight cars. These are very expensive investments we're making. So these are hard decisions.
Even with your budget, you're still talking about if you go and get the $60 freight, you're still talking probably 3 years to get to the level that you want to have a meaningful operating session. Whereas you spend a third of that money it could be up and running in a meaningful way inside of a year.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable. I think having placeholder freight cars is probably a pretty sensible decision to make. There's also some freight cars like TOFC flat cars or COFC for truck and container on flat car stuff. You could buy the AccuRail stuff, use it as placeholder, easily come back with some etched parts and detail those things and have fine stuff in the future when you've got time to go through the cars one at a time. And for things like
The other
So how
thing,
many
that matter,
locomotives do
Andy.
you have right now?
Why
We're
don't you just
talking
wait
over each
until-
other.
Why don't you wait until the Evansville Train Show Club has their next show this next year, and come in and buy a bunch of the old Athearn Blue Box stuff.
Yeah, you just have to weigh out what it costs you to get them up running to a meaningful state. And I'm not. Yes, I care about the detail and what they look like, but for placeholders, we don't have to worry about what they look like too terribly much. You could throw some really quick weathering on those, set down and airbrush them in mass, and get some really crappy weathering on them that will do the job and will hurt Ralph's feelings, and make them work okay as stand-ins. Okay. Well, listen, man, you take every plus you can get out of something, but you could get something that would placeholder and make it to where you could operate a railroad, especially when it comes to things like coal hoppers, where you need quite a few of them. You could probably buy some of those, but you've got to weigh out. Buying the cheapest is not always the most cost-effective. So you've got to weigh cost-effective. Well, cheap is not always cost-effective.
I'm talking the Athearn Blue Box kits.
Check
So
out
not the
Michael
regular roll.
Conley's statement.
They're not ready to run, not the regular ready rolls or whatever. The kits where they're already body mount couplers.
Yep.
So you're not having to swap out the trucks. You may want to swap out the wheel sets, but they were halfway decent wheel sets to start with.
Well, as long as they're metal, you can get by. Michael Connolly said, let me just put in a good word for the $15 Athearn freight cars. Perfectly serviceable and acceptable. And that's what I'm thinking. As placeholder freight cars, you could buy AccuRail, the AccuReady and the AccuRail stuff. You could buy plenty of the Walther stuff that you could get down in the $12 to $18 a car price range that are reasonably well weighted, that will require a little bit more weight. Because again, you got to keep in mind that if you're putting cars on the ground, it's no fun. If you have now sure, in my first operating session, there will probably be a few derailments from user error and from things I need to detail. But in the long run, if I've had a few operating sessions and I'm still having derailments, I'm a failure. You should not have a derailment in an operating session. Like
Andy,
none, zero.
That's part of railroading, though. Even the real railroads have derailments.
You're right. They'll put something on the ground, but it's rare, and it should be rare on the model. So
I don't know.
If
There's been an awful few here lately. Quite a few lately.
yeah, it's because of PSR.
But my goal would be for derailments are that if I had whatever 3 or 4 operating sessions, I could live with that. Well, outside of human error, you can't prevent some human error stuff, but you can prevent a lot of that with some of the things that I do. Like I subscribe to the Mike Confalo philosophy of weight. More is better. So if you really weigh the stuff and weight it down very heavily, and when you're running 20-something car trains with 3 scale trains, SD40s or whatever on the head end, 3 high adhesion 6-axle locomotives, and I'm using 2 pushers on the 2.5, 2.6% grade, you could absolutely load a boxcar full of wheel weights, as full as you could get it. You could still get it to the top of the hill. It's just these locomotives pull so much better than years ago when with the Athearn Blue Box locomotives and stuff, they didn't pull that great. They didn't have that much traction. These open frame can motors just didn't work as well. These modern locomotives, man, they'll pull a wall over. So
Well, it wasn't just motors on the old locomotives. They didn't weigh enough to start with.
right, and gears and just everything considered. And one of the keys to not having to decreasing derailments, besides the obvious good track work, wheel gauge and such, checking all those details, coupler height, that's a big one. Well-tuned turnouts. That's where 98% of your derailments are going to happen to turnout. So if you have all that well-tuned, one of the easiest ways to solve a lot of these problems is just a lot more weight. The more weight lets you get away with, makes everything just a tremendous lot more forgiving.
Okay, I gotta jump in here because it's time to disagree with you.
All right.
And Tim.
About time.
The Athearn Blue Box cars, there was nothing wrong with them other than the fact that it was all built-in detail. The reason why they didn't pull well is because they had plastic wheels. We all accept steel wheels now because plastic wheels don't work properly. So in those days, that's one of the reasons why they didn't run well. It was plastic wheels in plastic bearing pockets, and they bound. They just didn't work right.
So you think the freight cars?
Replace them with metal wheels, and they're just as good as a $35, $40 car.
So
Well,
you
see,
think
I've
the
had
freight
Athearn
cars
get
were the reason we couldn't run long trades years ago? These days, you can run 100-car trades. People do it all the time. You think freight cars were a big contributing part of why?
Yeah, it's friction. It was friction in the bearings and friction of the wheel set.
Just the wheel set alone is
Yeah.
friction.
I've seen several of the old Athearn Blue Box sets that actually had brass axles instead of plastic axles.
Yep. That's the really old ones.
The other thing is, how many trains are road trains in your area, and how many are locals, too?
Well, see, mine's entirely a road layout, pretty much. There's, there'll be one local. I mean, depends on how long of an operating session. Right now, I'm trying to get to a point where I can run an hour and a half, 2-hour operating session. Trying to get enough equipment and everything so I can get to the 4-hour marathon operating session that I dream of. I'm just not going to get there for a few more years for a whole host of reasons. Plus, I need the crew in order to do all that stuff too. So right now, I'm trying to get to where I can run a 2-hour operating session, let everybody run 2 to 3 trains.
Okay.
So,
How many
and they're
are-
all through trains for the most part. There'll be one. Well, local is a hard turn in the coal industry. So there's a one local turn that runs down to an interchange yard, changes some stuff out, and goes back. And then there's some mine run turns. So they're like locals, but not exactly.
What about temporarily, just a temporary situation in staging, depending on how accessible staging is, or even if you pull it back out, just rotating the waybills or card forwarding really quick and running the train again if it's not a coal train. If it's coal train, you may have to pull the hoppers out, but other than that, could forward the cars that already came in back to increase your train number so you get more freight cars.
Right. I'm going to do that for several of those and I've actually designed around that. So, for example, I've got 2 railroads. The CSX railroad, and what formerly was the Clinchfield, has a through staging arrangement. So the visible part of the CSX is operational. It goes to a yard, has a Y on both sides, but it's a loop, basically, that goes through the staging and out through the layout. So I'm going to run the CSX trains that I run. When I was saying I needed to be able to run to have 2 trains there, it's just a coal train and a freight train. And I plan on running those trains at least twice, maybe 3 times in the case of the coal train on the CSX. I'm just going to run them several times. So what? They're just, that at least initially to get operating. And the same thing will be true on the NS a little bit, but I'll have to modify some things because you have to interact with every train. No train navigates the railroad untouched. because it's a helper grade. You know, you're going to push to the top, or you know, there's going to be some interaction. But so I could trade around a little bit, modify, you know, move some cars around, take a few cars off, put a few cars on, switch the locomotives around. I could make it. But so what I'm saying, I need to get to that 18 locomotives or so, you know, or the about 12 or 13 locomotives for the Norfolk Southern. That's me counting on using at least half of them twice, and at least half of them twice, maybe all of them twice. And I still need about that.
Do helpers go back in go in staging?
Yep. Helpers I'm going to have the two Norfolk and Western, a high hood SD40-2 and a low nose SD40-2. I've already got both of those sitting over here right now. That'll be the helper pair. They'll be reused, you know, of course, continually. I mean, some interesting things that the Norfolk Southern and Norfolk and Western did, where I'm going to cut the head-end power off from a lower tier train like a coal train and use it to push a freight train to get to the top, because that slows the movement of the operations down, gives some kind of unique thing that is, you know, that the railroads actually did and is interesting to do. But even reusing all the equipment that much and moving that stuff around, you still need, it's amazing how much equipment you need, because there'll be at least 3 trains out on the layout for part of the operation. There'll be 3 Norfolk Southern trains out running at the same time.
What about if just starting out, we cut it down to 2 and just run 2 trains up and back?
Sure, as long as it's only me and one other person. My hope is that I could have 3 operators running trains, so they're going to need a train to run. And my layout can hold 3 trains on the Norfolk Southern side, and I could have one of them running the CSX, although the CSX is meant to basically be autonomous, because it's a very short section of visible railroad. There's only about 50, 60 feet of visible track there. That's why I'm going to let JMRI automate that run.
The other thing you have to think, Josh, is his helpers aren't going back to staging. They're going back to the helper pocket.
Yeah, that's one. They're just going to helper pocket, so they can just be rotated every train or every. Could only need 2 helpers then.
Yeah, I'll use these 2 helpers, but but I'm thinking I need those, something in that, 12 or 13 locomotives. But so you count the 2 helpers out. If you've got 3 trains out on the line, they need 3 locomotives on each of those. That's 9 more. I expected to have, say, 2 locomotives of 4 axles to run the local interchange run.
Do you have a triple track main then, or what?
Pardon me?
You have a triple track main or what?
No. Single track main line. But the reason that I have went to the craziness that I've went to try to pack as much railroad, well,
You stop.
some of it, just this one craziness. The reason that my railroad goes to 90 inches off the ground, and eventually when I build all of it, will go down to about 36 inches. The reason it has all these levels is to get that long mainline run. The whole point is to be able to have a long run. And even the top 2 levels that I'm just trying to get running for operations right now, it's about 200 and something feet of mainline. And with 200 feet of mainline, you can have 3 trains out. Not all 3 of those are out racing toward the end, but this is also a 25-mile-an-hour branch line. So a 200-foot line with 3 trains on helper grades being pushed, you can have 3 trains out on the line.
So how many full train length sidings do you have along your main line?
Well, there will be 5 or 6.
In answer to that, Robert, none.
Right now, there will be 3. There will be 3 on the operational section of the railroad. When I start operating on these top 2 levels, when I start operating late next year or the beginning of 22, there'll be 3 passing sidings. But the Norfolk Southern and Norfolk and Western before that often ran directionally by time of day. They fleeted trains. I also not every train heads the same direction. So I could run the intermodal, the stack train, the auto racks. They have to divert over CSX trackage for trackage rights. So that trade does some really interesting stuff that gets in the way of the other trades moving, but it only comes up to a certain point and then diverts off CSX and goes into staging. So
Check out Dwight, Andy.
yeah, Dwight, I'd look forward to after we get through this COVID. I can't wait to get operating so that I can have some people come visit physically in person. But I've got cameras hanging here. I'm working on getting all the cameras installed. I've got 12 or 13 of the cameras so far. I will have about 18.
So that you can run his trains virtually, Dwight.
Yep. So we'll be able to run trades, but I welcome you to come visit, of course. But I'm going to have all the cameras up over the railroad. I've got some of them up now. It's already getting later. I'd show you guys, but maybe another night I'll show you guys some of the cameras. I've already got some of the cameras up over the layout, so we will be able to operate over the internet. Because the biggest, especially when I build the lower two decks, I could fit more trains than I could fit humans in the space. So
I hope so.
I would hope so, yeah.
Well, I could not most railroads I've operated on, you could get 3 or 4 trains out on a main line and you were congested. No, that was difficult. But you could easily fit 6 or 8 people in the railroad room. And many railroads that I've operated on, we've operated 2-man crews and stuff. In my case, 4 people in the train room is a bit tight, but I could easily keep 5 or 6 trains moving at some point when I have, all 4 levels built, assuming I build the bottom 2 levels before I relocate the layout to a new building. But yeah, and Michael Conley said it molded on details acceptable for what I was doing. That's one of the things that the guys pick on me for. For placeholders, sure, for placeholders. I have a couple criteria for rolling stock that I really like separate grabs. I'm a big fan of separate grabs.
Temporary work, though.
That's right. As a placeholder, it doesn't really matter. I also don't assume that that's necessary for everybody. It depends on your layout. My layout's quite literally at eye level, right here, front and center, right up close. The molded grabs don't, you can't hide it as well with even proper weathering techniques. If your layout's at 40 inches or something and you're looking down a little bit, with proper weathering, molded on grabs look fine. But if they're really close front and center, it's harder to hide them. That's right, Dwight. Got to take care of Johnny first.
Yeah. That could be expensive, Dwight.
Oh, you say that. You're a Waffle House man, just like I am.
Yeah, I gotta go check out a new fish house Saturday night.
Oh, that sounds good to me. Yeah, Adrian, I do too. That my whole railroad is built around CSX and Norfolk Southern interchanging. I think that's some of the most interesting things you can do on a model railroad is to have 2 railroads that interact with each other, because a single track that hooks those 2 together is an industry that can take any type of car, and that you can interchange numerous cars in a single operating session. So any type of car with any, with however much frequency you need to make your operating session entertaining. So I love interchange.
My philosophy on the budget was you have at least 2 cars for every industry. And then you have a spare on the train itself for each industry.
Yeah.
So that's 3.
Well, see, the way I operate, most of the railroad of your train is off the railroad on either side, because it's a point-to-point railroad where most of that point-to-point is not modeled. So you actually get paperwork for your train as if you're going to operate, as if you're going to drop cars or do work at all these towns down the line, and it'll just have a marking of where you're starting at. So you have all this paperwork telling you what to do at Daw and Cleveland and all these other towns that I haven't even modeled. And then you'll take over your trade when it comes on a visible part of the layout. You'll do the work that is on the visible layout, and then it'll head off to staging, but it will have work listed after it heads to staging. It's more believable that way to look at your paperwork as if you were running truly from Bluefield to Norton, which is 90 miles, even though I'm only modeling 20 miles.
But that might be more confusing to operators.
Yes, but all you have to do is say this is your section. And for operators that I'm trying to train to get used to operating, one, if you're training to operate on my railroad, odds are your first half hour or hour will be just like it would be on the prototype. You'll be the second man on a crew for a train movement, and then here's the throttle, go to town. Or I could just highlight the part that you need to do the work on. But odds are new crews would take through trades. They wouldn't do mine runs that are more complicated.
Did you get that?
Yeah, unless I for me and go to a layout that the first time I went to, I took the hardest job.
Sure.
So
I've
what's
done
the
that.
hardest? What's the hardest job?
It was this local that went to Sandusky on this layout. Very complicated switching puzzle. And you had through trains coming through. Which, yeah.
Did you have a dispatcher?
Yeah. And, yeah. But the thing was hard was the switching puzzle. It was a pretty complicated one.
That's not normally part of a
I know,
layout.
it's a club layout that I went to visit.
Right.
Yardmaster, I think, is one of the hardest jobs to operate near an operating session, and one of the hardest things to model correctly from an operating standpoint, because we can use fast clocks out on the railroad and selectively compress our lines and all that stuff. Like my railroad's roughly 1 to 4 or 25% compressed. I'm modeling 20 miles, 24 miles, 24 real miles in about 6 scale miles. So 1 to 4 compression. I'm running a 25 car train instead of a 100 car train. I'm basically compressing everything down, and all of the movements I'm compressing down. And I'm going to run a 4 to 1 fast clock. I can compress all that down. But when you get to a yard, they're basically 1 for 1 movements. I mean, you might do a few less of them, but they're roughly 1 for 1. So a yard master is like a one-armed paper hanger or something. They get really, really overly busy for a railroad that often is much busier than would be even in the prototype. I've opted to not model a visible yard because I think it's very difficult to do well on an operational railroad in a constrained space. If you've got a lot of space, yes, no question. And when I can grow my layout considerably, a yard will be part of that equation.
We'll catch you later, Rob.
Boy, that paint technique you're working on, Ralph, is kind of spectacular. I'm telling you.
Well, I tell you
like
what,
that?
we're pretty much coming up on the 1 hour mark here. Anybody want to make a closing statement?
I think Sar at N-Scale might have had one of the best. He says, I think the best thing you can do on a model railroad layout is have fun. And I second that entirely. While we can disagree, talk about all of our opinions and everything, all of us are still out to have fun. We're still out to have fun. We may have different ideas of it, but we're all still out to have fun the same way. So
Different people have different ideas of what fun is.
absolutely. Some people like shooting to operate, some people like shoots and ladders. Some people like bridge, and some people rugby. That's a beautiful thing about our hobby, is that it's incredibly diverse, and there isn't a right answer for each of you.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming in on chat, and appreciate y'all coming in on the panel here. Don't forget, we've got small layouts, big opportunities this Saturday at 9 o'clock. So I think they're getting close to the end, I believe. Yeah, I think they might have 1 or 2 more shows left, and that'll be it. So, don't forget to tune in for that. And then the next week, we've got Who's Big Bill talking to on the 14th.
Again, yeah.
And he's going to have Steve Atwell back on again.
Mm-hmm.
Steve's been making a few changes.
Good.
Kind of major. So he's going to talk about that. Alrighty. Y'all have a good weekend. Be safe. Stay
And
off.
for the Canadians out there, happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
It's our
that's right, y'all
Thanksgiving
got-
weekend this weekend.
Yeah. That's going to be Monday, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Ralph.
Happy Thanksgiving.
So, all right, y'all have a good weekend. Stay safe.